So, Transhumanism Lecture 7. We're talking about consciousness today, but as usual, I'll start with what's been happening in the world of AI over the last few days. And it's pretty amazing what's happened over the last 5 days, just the articles I've read. So, let's pull some of these up. So, we'll start with this article, which is still talking about uh, the stuff that Anthropic released with their Claude add-ons and how it's going to change the world of work. And they're still talking about that. So Fox, this article had an interview with this guy, works in the AI industry, and what he says about AI is um, pretty amazing. This guy, Matt Schumann, he said last year, new techniques for building these models unlocked a faster pace of progress. And then it got even faster, and then faster again. Each new model wasn't just better than the last, it was better by a wide margin. So we're making new models faster and faster, and they're jumping way, way ahead in how good they are. And he says, and I was using AI more and more, watching it handle things that used to require my expertise. This guy's a software engineer, by the way. So you've got uh, the two new model, OpenAI and Anthropic releasing the new models. He said, it's the moment you realize the water has been rising around you and you haven't noticed, but now it's at your chest height and you're kind of drowning in this stuff. He says, I am no longer needed for the technical work of my job. I describe what I want in English and it just appears, not a rough draft I need to fix, the finished thing. I tell AI what I want, walk away from my computer for a few hours, come back and it's done. Done well, better than I could have done it myself. No corrections needed. A few months ago, I was going back and forth with AI, guiding it and making edits. Now I just describe what I want and leave. So, and he says the new GPT model he uses for coding wasn't just executing my instructions, it's making intelligent decisions. It had something that felt for the first time like judgment, like taste. It knows what the right call to make is. And then this article goes on to talk about some other uses of AI. One of them is this person. Have you heard of this singer, Zania Monet? She's on the Billboard Top 30, has a multi-million dollar record deal, AI generated. I'd never heard of this woman, but yeah, until I saw this article. Well, she's not a woman, but I'd never heard of this AI thing until I read this article. It goes on to talk about that. So the implications here are just phenomenal. And what is happening, this article came out in Axios a couple of days ago that basically says the research that is being done to analyze and look at the AI models, by the time it's published, it's already two models behind. So the work we're doing, all the research we're doing on AI is models behind what because they're coming out so fast. The research cannot keep up to check these models to analyze them or even use them, show how they're being used. NVIDIA announced this. It's actually been out for a couple of weeks, but I only saw it the other day. That little box by the side of the laptop, $4,000. Basically, you can build your own AI system in there. We were talking about trillion parameter models now. This can handle about 100 billion parameters. It works at 1 petaflop. If you have a laptop, that probably works more than 1,000 times slower. So this is $4,000, and you can have an AI system sitting on your desk. In a year or two, this will be in every laptop, I guess. Uh, Google Chrome announced WebMCP this week, February the 12th. What is WebMCP? Well, a lot of web browsing now isn't done by humans anymore. AI does the web browsing for you. This is a problem for many websites that make money from advertising because you're not looking at the websites anymore. AI is looking at them and giving you answers. And WebMCP is a way for machines to read websites much more efficiently. So this is coming out. Basically, the internet and the web is turning into a place that humans don't visit anymore. Uh, I told you last week about Chrome's auto browse agent that browses the web for you that just came out last week. There's a great article in Ars Technica where they set it a whole bunch of tasks to do. Some of them it did really well, some of them it failed miserably. But, the next version of it will probably be 10 times better than this version, and that'll probably come out in a few weeks. So they'll fix whatever it can't do. But this is agentic AI, task orientated. You set it doing things and it goes off and does them for you. Anthropic, I've been in the news a lot this week. The CEO, Dario, this guy, Dario Amodei, he's their CEO. He says at the moment we're in the centaur phase where you kind of half human, half machine. He says, but this is going away in a year or two. Within the next year, humans won't be programming at all. And there was another article here in Fortune, again, the magazine for CEOs, saying that OpenAI's Codex, Anthropic's code, basically no one programs anymore without using AI. Everybody uses AI. Claude, Anthropic have just announced that they are introducing or giving away their Claude code system to 20,000 students at community colleges, state schools, so that they can learn how to program with their AI tools. So literally they announced that the other day, February 13th. This is an interesting story that came up. When the American government captured Nicolas Maduro from Venezuela, the raid was controlled using Anthropic's Claude system. The AI system was giving the troops advice on what to do. And Anthropic aren't very happy about that. So they're actually having an argument with the American government about how their system should be used ethically. So yeah, this is going to be an interesting story to watch how that developed. And at the moment, we're studying consciousness. And Dario Amodei was interviewed a couple of days ago, and they asked him if Claude is conscious. And he said, I don't know. But he said, what's interesting is if you ask their latest system, Claude Opus 4.6, and you ask it, are you conscious? It says there is a probability of 15 to 20% that it is conscious. And then, but as Dario said, okay, only 15%, but what happens when Claude starts saying it's 80% sure it's conscious? And that's the question he asked back. And he says, I honestly don't know. It's a really hard question to answer, which is what we're going to be studying today, why it's so hard to tell if a machine is conscious. He said, we don't know if the models are conscious, he says, but we're open to the idea that it could be. So we're at this stage where people are talking about these models being conscious. And it's easy to dismiss it and say, oh, no, 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 they're not. But even if there's a 1% chance it's conscious, that's like the biggest news story ever, you know? Um, Meta announced that they're putting facial recognition in their smart glasses, like a surveillance network, so it will recognize people. So it's kind of handy. You don't have to remember people, just like we don't remember phone numbers, you don't have to remember people's names. Your glasses will remind you of people's names. But there's some real ethical and privacy issues here about not only recording people, but identifying them as well. Um, China. Some of you may know that this weekend was the Asian New Year, the Lunar New Year. Well, you know, you were at the celebration with me. We went and celebrated yesterday in Rochester, um, but over in China, their New Year celebration has been all robots, all the big publicity. It's kind of crazy. Even more amazing, this one. This was a New Year event in China. Pretty, I honestly, it's astonishing. Um, but yeah, article, another article from CNN on robots in China. China's population is shrinking, and China has a predominantly manufacturing economy, and they are predicting that 70% of the workforce in their manufacturing plants will be robots within 6 years. 70%. An interesting research article, the first full-size humanoid with touch motion control. What does that mean? It has sensors all over the body so that if you touch it, it can react like a human reacts. So if it knocks into something, it knows it's touched something. Sensors all over the body, the first full-size, fully censored human robot. Another interesting one from China, a research article. They built a robot that can grow and shrink in size by about 30 to 40%. Uh, the issue, they were talking about robots that can grow. Um, One of the issues with robots is they're still 4 or 5 times heavier than humans. A humanoid robot is 4 or 5 times heavier than the equivalent human. And so they're trying to develop human-like bones that can go in the robot and actually grow over time, and the robot can uh, expand and shrink, which is another quite amazing example. This particular robot at the moment isn't very humanoid, but it does grow and shrink. But they're still developing the technology. China has just implemented robots on its border with Vietnam. It's at this place called Phang Chengang. It's a trade route between China and Vietnam, and they often have rows of trucks queued up waiting to get through the border. Um, the government has announced it's implementing $40 million worth of robots, and these robots have vision sensors, facial recognition, and they can climb in trucks and inspect and search the trucks. So these robots are being used as border patrol guards starting, again, only announced a few days ago, 13th of February, that was announced. There has been of a lot of news reports about unemployment and AI over the last week. The godfather of AI, that's Geoffrey Hinton, who was a research scientist in neural networks. He went on to be head of AI for Google. He resigned a couple of years ago, stating that AI was getting too dangerous. He didn't want to work for Google anymore. And he warned that there is going to be mass unemployment in the next 5 years. But interestingly, this guy, who is Sal Khan, he owns the Khan Academy, which is an online learning system. He also runs the TED Talks uh, internationally. He said in an interview this week that yes, Geoffrey Hinton said there'd be mass unemployment. He said, but even if we have 10% of the unemployment that Geoffrey Hinton predicts, it's going to have enormous economic impact, and people aren't ready for this. So, the other thing that the Anthropic CEO said this week was that yes, there will be unemployment, but he said the difference is there was massive unemployment when farming became mechanized. There was massive unemployment during the Industrial Revolution, but those changes took centuries or decades. He said, now we're changing every few months. He said, and that's the difference. This change is going to come a lot faster, or is coming a lot faster. This guy, Jad Tarifi, was one of the heads of AI for Google. Um, he left Google last year, and he was in an interview this week, again, Fortune magazine, the magazine for CEOs, saying degrees in law and medicine are a waste of time because AI is advancing so fast in these fields that your degree will be, it takes so long to get a degree, and your degree will be so far out of date that it's pointless. He says doing a PhD is pointless as well. So he says because of AI's rapid development, he says you just lose those years. Microsoft's current AI boss this week said that AI will be able to replace every white collar office job in 18 months. We are going to have human level performance on most, if not all, professional tasks. So everyone. So this is like the Claude thing that people who work in offices, lawyers, salespeople, all of that is going to be replaced by AI. Kind of depressing, isn't it? This has all come out this week, yeah? They still say, this guy from Microsoft actually said, we will still need people to kind of create the programs with AI, like coders, but there'll be a very different type of coder. He says we'll still need those people. But he said there's not a lot of jobs that aren't going to be replaced. I mean, this may not happen. It's what all these people are saying in interviews, but you've got to remember the they own AI companies. So, they're the people who are they are the people who are hyping up their own technology. Yeah.
Couple months to say this over and over again. They're like, no more coders in the
Yeah,
university.
I know, but the time frames are getting short. They used to say in 10 years there'll be no more coders. Now they're saying in 18 months there'll be no more coders. The time frames are getting shorter and we're actually seeing it happen, which we weren't before. There were predictions before. Now we're seeing it happen. Yeah.
It also depends on the location and the population.
Yeah,
Like
the location and population, absolutely.
big
Different
cities.
places in the world are going to be very different. Yeah.
Yeah, because like in big cities, you might see more of this, while in more rural places, it'll probably go
Yeah.
more slow.
City, it's the same with driverless cars. Oswego's probably going to be one of the last places to get driverless cars, but they're in the big cities already. Yeah. So, yeah, it does depend where you are. But um, the, the thing about this, though, is the technology is very transferable. So if you replace people in an office in New York City, you can replace them in an office in rural Oswego as well. You know, I don't know, but there's just been because I think it's because of the Claude announcement that I talked about a few weeks ago. Everyone's been talking about this week. There's been lots of articles about workplace futures this week, and we will have a class of a lecture or two looking at future workplace, whether that's in this class or the next one, and trying to predict what's going to happen. But to be honest, every time I teach this class, it's totally different because all the predictions have changed from last year. And the technology's changed, the agentic AI, the new Claude system. So yeah, it gets more and more likely. So this guy, um, Mirank Sharma, he was head of safety for Anthropic, and he resigned just a few days ago. And in a public statement about his resignation, he says that the AI has become too dangerous. He's concerned about AI bioweapons and the state of the wider world. He's, he says the world is in peril, not just from AI bioweapons, but from a whole series of interconnected crises unfolding in this very moment. And he said he had repeatedly seen how hard it is to let our values govern actions. And so he resigned, saying that he's just going to go away and do something else and not try not to think about it, anymore, because it seems too dangerous. Um, OpenAI did something very interesting a couple of days ago. Um, their mission statement said that OpenAI aims to build artificial intelligence that safely benefits humanity. They changed their mission statement to just build artificial intelligence that benefits humanity. They removed the word safely. Why would they do that? I guess so they don't get sued when it's dangerous. I don't know. But yeah, it's a weird thing to do. Um, but that just a few days ago they changed their mission statement. Interesting article in Salon a couple of days ago, February 15th, 2 days ago. Um, this was about how we've had bots on social media sowing discord and especially political bots trying to foment discord. And we've had that, foreign actors like China is and Russia have both been implicated in this, of creating bots in America that get people riled up. Now, what this article is talking about is that they used to find these bots, and there would be thousands of them, all interconnected, working together to sort this code, and you could find them. But what they say is you can't find them now because they're AI generated. So you can't tell the difference between a bot and a real person. You can't detect these things anymore. And um, and the networks are way, way bigger now. So there's so much disinformation out there. This was a terrifying article to read. Just about well worth looking up and having a look at it. Um, Another interesting one. This guy Sam Schneider or Schechter, um, he runs an open source software project, and some AI bots have been submitting code to his open source project. He refused to use that code, and the bots started hassling him online and sending him insults and hassling him online, bullying him effectively to use their code. So it's an interesting kind of article, AI aggression, that these AI bots, because these bots are programmed to get their code used, and then when you don't use it, they get quite angry. They seem to get angry. Um, Another article, this is actually an older article, but I only saw it. It was a survey of university professors. 95% of them say AI is making students dangerously dependent on technology for learning. Students aren't learning. If you're using AI all the time, you're not learning anything yourself. That's why we do this discussion thing now. Interesting article. Um, and of course, over the weekend, it was Valentine's Day. So all the papers had lots of articles about AI relationships. Um, ChatGPT, they're currently GPT, different variants of GPT-5 are currently available. One of their old models, GPT-4o, which was one of the smaller four models, is about to be switched off. But people have relationships with bots in the AI system 4.0, and they're going to lose the person they're with, they have a relationship with when this thing is switched off. This woman is married to her bot, had a ceremony, is married, and there are people who are running support groups for people who are affected by this. And they're saying there's a lot of people, when this one is switched off, a lot of people are going to lose the person they talk to every day because it's in the AI bot. Again, we'll be talking about relationships with AI in one of the classes. I don't know if we'll do it this class or next semester, but one of the classes in transhumanism, we talk about relationships with machines. But there's been a whole slew of these over the weekend. What is it like to go out with an AI companion in New York City came out this weekend. The New York Times had a big article on we're in a throuple with AI, a couple who have an AI as a third partner in their relationship. Um, this woman, Chat GPT, promised to help her find her soulmate, then it betrayed her. So all of these came out, February the 14th. So they're all around Valentine's Day. So yeah, quite a busy week. All of that happened in 5 days. All of those articles came out in 5 days. Um, but the one that caused the most upset, did any of you see this video of Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt fighting? Yeah, you saw this? It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah. So this is an AI generated uh, little movie clip of Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise fighting in a movie. It was generated in 2 sentences on an AI video creation platform. And the thing is, all these kind of screenwriters and producers are saying Hollywood is in real trouble. Hollywood's about to be decimated because of this. They're saying we can never go back. So if you haven't seen it, let's have a look at this clip. It's astonishing. So the stopping is due to my latency on my network, not the. It's amazing, isn't it? Two sentences generated this. Oh, yeah, you can see why the people in Hollywood are worried. Any more comments or questions before we carry on with consciousness? That was a terrifying 5 days, wasn't it? 5 days. No jobs. AI is almost conscious. All in 5 days. Yeah.
Like the bones.
The bones. Yeah. Well, they're building them artificially. They're not building them out of organics, but human bones are quite strong, but very light, because they're hollow. Um, So that's what the article was saying. The robots have solid steel, which is heavier. So they need to find materials that are like bone for robots so they can be lighter. And this is something like that. And, like I said, they've got this robot. It's a research project. It's not a real, but they're just trying with materials that will expand and contract and grow and, on robots. So, yeah, it it's getting somewhere though. Yeah, it's been quite a few days. A lot of articles. Like I say, I read this stuff all the time, and I try and keep up. But man, it's hard to keep up with this stuff. There's so much happening around us at the moment. Uh, one of the articles had a great term. He says they wrote um, uh, the big AI companies produce new models like a drumbeat, because every week there's a new model, new model, new model. They're producing them so fast. All right. So, consciousness. You will need to take some notes. We're going to be you're going to be taking notes in question two. Question two asks you to fill in some notes from the class. So, just kind of jot down things you learn, things that interest you, or um, all right. You will see on Brightspace there are 3 pages on consciousness. The first two are what I'm going to talk about in today's lecture, maybe on Thursday as well. We'll see how far we get. Um, and there is an assignment as well, which is not due until the end of next week, which is this worksheet. And there is some readings for you to do on that. And all the readings you need to do are on the consciousness 3 page. Okay? We'll go through those. So, we started in the last class just talking about, I was talking about robotic toasters and toasters that talk to you, and we showed this video. Was really just to show the reason we study consciousness is because eventually in this class, we're going to get on to discussing machine consciousness, robot consciousness. But to do that, you have to understand human consciousness. And every discussion of human consciousness starts with this guy, Nagel, Thomas Nagel, a philosopher. Thomas Nagel is a very interesting guy who studies consciousness, and he's still alive, and he works in New York City University in the Center for Consciousness with David Chalmers, who we've met, who does the extended mind thing. So that's the big consciousness place. But Nagel is the most famous philosopher, one of the most famous philosophers of consciousness, Thomas Nagel. And back in 1974, he produced this paper called "What is it like to be a bat?" And this changed how everyone talks about consciousness. So he says consciousness is a mind-body problem. It's kind of intractable. It's really hard to solve this problem. But he said we should think about it in a different way. So have a look at this. He said, conscious experience is a widespread phenomenon. It occurs on many levels of animal life. We don't know if it's in the simpler organisms like amoebas. Do they have consciousness? And it's difficult to say what provides evidence of it. So, no doubt, consciousness occurs in many forms that are unimaginable to us. We have human consciousness. A dog has a different kind of consciousness, probably. And then there might be aliens throughout the universe that have different consciousness. So he says, but no matter how the form may vary, the fact an organism has a conscious experience at all means that there is something it is like to be that organism. This is one of the most famous lines in philosophy. There is something it is like to be that organism. So he says, no matter what the organism is or what it experiences, he says, fundamentally, the organism has conscious mental states if there is something it is like to be that organism. So what he says is, let's imagine a bat. What is it like to be a bat? If a bat has a conscious experience, can we know what that conscious experience of being a bat is? And that's why his paper is called, What is it like to be a bat? And so when you're discussing consciousness, this is the way you discuss it. What is it like to be that robot or that animal or whatever? So let's watch a video of two videos explaining Nagel's ideas. Let me turn the sound on.
What does it mean to be conscious? According to the American philosopher Thomas Nagel, consciousness consists of two fundamental aspects, the objective and the subjective. The objective aspect refers to the observable processes that correlate with conscious mental states, such as, for instance, the firing of neurons in our brain, or even conceivably, the informational states of an artificially intelligent computer. While the subjective aspect refers to what it is like to actually experience being in those mental states. What it is like, for example, to experience the redness of red or the sensation of pain. experiences or phenomena which philosophers of mind refer to as qualia. To illustrate this conceptual distinction between objective and subjective, consider the possibility of an automaton that operates in the same way as you or I, but which lacks any subjective awareness of its activities. That such a being is even conceivable reveals that there is a clear distinction between objective and subjective mental states. This can be illustrated further by considering the fact
I don't know what's wrong with the internet today.
that at times we've all operated like automata,
Come on.
whether it's negotiating traffic while engaged in a deep conversation, eating while engrossed in a movie, or even, for some, sleepwalking. In 1974, in his paper What Is It Like to Be a Bat?, Nagel famously framed this distinction between subjective and objective by proposing that one could know all the objective properties of a bat, such as that it flies, uses echolocation, etc., and yet know absolutely nothing about the subjective aspect of what it is actually like to be a bat. According to Nagel, for any definition of consciousness to be valid, it must explain both the objective and subjective aspects. For this reason, Nagel rejects the attempts of physicalists such as Donald Davidson and Daniel Dennett, who claim that consciousness is nothing more than the underlying physical mental states. That said, Nagel himself was fairly pessimistic as to whether in fact any satisfactory definition of consciousness was even possible, arguing that certain facts may simply be beyond the reach of human concepts.
So, interesting idea, this idea of subjective. So let's examine that a little bit further. I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on with the internet today. It's running a little bit slow. Let's try refreshing this video before we start it. That might make it a little bit better. I don't know if it runs at all.
In What Is It Like to Be a Bat?, Thomas Nagel argues that the answer to this eponymous question is we can't know what it's like to be a bat. In particular, we can't know what it's like for a bat to be a bat. Nagel's idea is that we can understand what it's like to be another creature only to the extent that we can empathetically imagine ourselves as that creature. The good news is that we have the capacity for empathetic imagination, so we're often able to have a pretty good idea of what it's like to be another person. The bad news is that even understanding what it's like to be another person has its limits. I can only empathetically imagine what it's like to be another person to the extent that I can take up their point of view. The idea that what it's like to be us is essentially tied to a point of view is central to Nagel's thought. Start with the literal sense of the term. As I stand here speaking to you, I'm facing one direction, and you, via the camera, are facing a different direction. If I want to know what it's like to be a student in this class, I can begin by taking up your point of view. For example, going around to behind the camera and seeing how things look from there. If I want to know what it's like to be a bit taller, I can stand on my tiptoes. And if I want to know what it's like to be a bit shorter, I can bend down. But your point of view, in the sense relevant to what it's like to be you, is not exhausted by where you stand, which direction you face, and how tall you are. Seeing things from your point of view also involves having certain kinds of background knowledge and experience. Some of those are so common that we take them for granted, like having the ability to recognize certain objects as books or to read words. Others are more subtle. Can you empathetically imagine how this scene looks to someone who has blurry vision, someone who's colorblind, or someone who has a form of synesthesia where they experience colors when they hear sounds? And that's just the beginning. There are also personal, social, and cultural factors. My point of view is the point of view of a white American male of a certain age, education, and income. That's probably not as important to how I see this room as it is to other experiences I have, like the experience of when a police officer pulls me over for speeding. Whatever the details, there's no doubt that what it's like to be us includes aspects of things like gender, race, sexual identity, social and economic background, religious or irreligious upbringing, and education, wealth, and more. These can both enable empathetic imagination and be obstacles. Now then, Nagel tells us that he chose the example of bats because bats are biologically quite similar to us, they're mammals, while at the same time having a form of life that's fundamentally alien to ours. I can imagine hanging upside down in the dark, eating bugs and whatnot, but that strikes us as still falling far short of knowing what it's like to have a bat's way of life. And it's certainly very remote from knowing what it's like for a bat to be a bat. Having drawn our attention to the possibilities and limits of empathetic imagination, Nagel explains these facts in terms of what he calls the subjective character of experience. The idea is that conscious experience is subjective in the sense that it belongs to a particular subject or a kind of subject, or, as he sometimes says, it's inherently tied to a point of view.
All right. So, everyone okay with that? Everyone got that idea? This is where everyone starts talking about consciousness. Nagel. Since 1974, you always start with Nagel. What is it like to be a bat or something else and have that subjective experience? And this it's a very popular view that Nagel's view of the objective and the subjective. There's the physical brain, but then there's this subjective experience you have. And we're going to look at that a little bit more. And this comes back to our, if we look at a definition of consciousness, as usual with these things, they're almost impossible to define. Every time we try to define something in philosophy, there's always arguments about it. The nature of consciousness is one of the most important and perplexing areas of philosophy. It's notoriously ambiguous. So it talks about where the word comes from. The most commonly used contemporary notion of conscious mental state is Thomas Nagel. What is it like? So every definition of consciousness starts with Nagel. When I'm in a conscious mental state, there is something it is like for me to be in that state from a subjective or first-person point of view. But then how do we understand that? How is that mental state related to my body and my brain? Can it be explained in terms of brain activity? What makes a mental state a conscious mental state? The problem of consciousness is the most central issue in philosophy and importantly related to major topics in metaphysics. So the idea of immortality and free will, which we'll cover later, probably in the second class, are tied to consciousness. The two traditional competing theories are dualism and materialism. Cartesian dualism and materialism or physicalism. There are many versions of each. Dualism says that the mind or mental state is non-physical in some sense. This subjective experience, whether we call it a soul or something else, a spirit or an essence, there's something outside that makes us conscious. The materialists or physicalists say that we are just matter, meat sacks, and that's all there is. There's no soul. But there are many objections to either side, materialist and dualist. And your belief in these was probably down to your cultural background. You'll notice in question 1, there are the 2 words, dualist and materialist. I want you to put a little tick or a circle around one of them. Where do you fall? I'm a materialist, very much so, a physicalist, but I also understand there's lots of problems that philosophy doesn't work very well sometimes. But I'm just interested how many of the class are one or the other. There's no right or wrong here. I'm just interested in what proportion of the class goes one way or the other. All right. So, okay. So, we're going to start watching another video, a couple of videos on people trying to define consciousness. Any questions before we start that? Everyone okay? As I said, you should be filling in question 2 as we go through some of this stuff.
Here are 2 images of a house. There's one obvious difference, but to this patient, PS, they looked completely identical. PS had suffered a stroke that damaged the right side of her brain, leaving her unaware of everything on her left side. But though she could discern no difference between the houses, when researchers asked her which she would prefer to live in, she chose the house that wasn't burning. Not once, but again and again. PS's brain was still processing information from her whole field of vision. She could see both images and tell the difference between them. She just didn't know it. If someone threw a ball at her left side, she might duck, but she wouldn't have any awareness of the ball or any idea why she ducked. PS's condition, known as hemispatial neglect, reveals an important distinction between the brain's processing of information and our experience of that processing. That experience is what we call consciousness. We are conscious of both the external world and our internal selves. We are aware of an image in much the same way we are aware of ourselves looking at an image, or our inner thoughts and emotions. But where does consciousness come from? Scientists, theologians, and philosophers have been trying to get to the bottom of this question for centuries without reaching any consensus. One recent theory is that consciousness is the brain's imperfect picture of its own activity. To understand this theory, it helps to have a clear idea of one important way the brain processes information from our senses. Based on sensory input, it builds models, which are continuously updating simplified descriptions of objects and events in the world. Everything we know is based on these models. They never capture every detail of the things they describe, just enough for the brain to determine appropriate responses. For instance, one model built deep into the visual system codes white light as brightness without color. In reality, white light includes wavelengths that correspond to all the different colors we can see. Our perception of white light is wrong and oversimplified, but good enough for us to function. Likewise, the brain's model of the physical body keeps track of the configuration of our limbs, but not of individual cells or even muscles, because that level of information isn't needed to plan movement. If it didn't have the model keeping track of the body's size, shape, and how it is moving at any moment, we would quickly injure ourselves. The brain also needs models of itself. For example, the brain has the ability to pay attention to specific objects and events. It also controls that focus, shifting it from one thing to another, internal and external, according to our needs. Without the ability to direct our focus, we wouldn't be able to assess threats, finish a meal, or function at all.
Okay, so that gives us some basic idea of a slightly different way of looking at consciousness through information processing. A very interesting story about the woman who her her senses are processing information and her brain's processing it, but she has no internal awareness of it. Her conscious self doesn't know what she's seeing. Okay, one more little video. We're not watching all of it. We'll watch the first half. This is Vsauce again.
Hey, Vsauce, Michael here, and a hemispherectomy is a surgical procedure in which half of a person's brain is removed. It's usually only ever done on very, very young patients because their brains are still plastic enough that the remaining half will take on the functions of the half that was removed. And it's usually done because a young child or a baby is having seizures, and removing the part where the seizures occur is the only solution. But here's my question. If you can live with half a brain, what if I were to take two empty skulls and take one half of your brain and plop it into one body, and the other half and put it in another body? Which person would be you? I mean, you are you. You are conscious. You are aware of what is happening to you from the perspective of yourself. Like, think of it this way. If you just stare at something and kind of feel what it feels like to be you, it feels a little bit like you're a thing inside a body looking out through the eyeballs, and nobody else on earth will ever see the world from that position. This awareness of your own experiences, the awareness that you are having them, the awareness that you are having your own thoughts, makes up what we call consciousness. But if I were to take your brain and split it into two and put it into two different people, would both of them be new people who were conscious? Well, one of the best places to start when defining consciousness and understanding it is to begin with things that we agree are not conscious. For instance, Cleverbot. Cleverbot.com is an amazing website where a computer program will respond to your questions really cleverly, but only because it is programmed to do so. We wouldn't consider it conscious because it doesn't have a sense of itself. It doesn't feel anything. It doesn't have its own inner life. It's just a program that responds automatically to my inputs. Now, I know that I am not like Cleverbot. I know that I feel things and that I have a sense of myself. I have intentions. But how do I know that you do? For that matter, how do I know that everybody else that I meet is like me? How do I know that they're not just little smart versions of Cleverbot who know exactly what to automatically say? Now, what I'm asking is incredibly philosophical, but it is a very famous and important question. I'm basically asking if it's possible for something to exist as a philosophical zombie. That's right, a thing that reacts and responds and acts just like a normal human, but yet doesn't actually feel anything. It doesn't know that it's having its own thoughts. It just automatically responds like a robot in the appropriate way. Now, what's amazing and heavy about this question is that science doesn't have an answer. And it's not even clear that science will ever have an answer, let alone an approach to finding that answer. About all we have is the psychology of disorders of consciousness.
Oh, this is a fascinating video. If you do want to watch it till the end, it's a really interesting video talking about what happens when people have problems with their consciousness. What does that tell us about consciousness? So that video starts to open up some of the things we'll be talking about later in the course. Why would we be interested in this idea of philosophical zombies? A zombie, a copy of a human who has no inner consciousness. Why would that be interesting to us? That's AI. Yeah, that's a robot. That's what we think they are. You know, we can build a robot that simulates a human, but does it have qualia, this sense of inner self, this experience? So the philosophical zombies will crop up again and again. And guess who's the person who writes most about philosophical zombies? Chalmers, David Chalmers. So those of you who are reading David Chalmers will probably come across him talking about philosophical zombies. Also, this mentioned in that video was this idea of the problem of other minds, also called solipsism, which is a certain idea in philosophy that you are the only person that exists. There is no one else that exists. And we'll talk about that in a moment as well, as a form of as an idea about consciousness. Any questions? All good so far. All right. So what I want you to do now is I want you all to just spend a minute or two, and I want you to just look at the definition you wrote down for consciousness in number 1 when you wrote something. I've just spent half an hour, 3/4 of an hour giving you definitions of consciousness, how we talk about consciousness. Do you think your definition was bad and should it be changed? Just have a quick, make a few notes on that, whether you think you should change it or not. I'm going to pause the video here just for a moment. All right. So I said there's no right or wrong answers here for I don't expect you all to write a perfect definition of consciousness. Philosophers have been trying to do that for 3,000 years and still haven't managed it. So I don't expect you to do it after just taking a couple of classes. So what do you think? Has anyone realized something they missed or didn't talk about? Come on, someone talk to me. Or were all your definitions perfect first time? Yes, Lewis.
Grasp of the concept. But I think the personal aspects that we talked about today, personal point of view and the context of experience of both physical context of experience, mental context of experience. So I think I would have
So Alyssa was saying her first one was very vague, but this idea of physical and subjective, objective and subjective points of consciousness, you didn't have no idea about, but now it seems, like a more sensible way to think about it. Yeah. Anyone else get anything else they noticed? Nothing? Come on, someone give me one and then we'll move on. Nothing? Go on, folks.
I said the soul and I'm sticking with the soul, so.
You're sticking with the soul. You said it was about having a soul and you're sticking with that. Dualist at the back there. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. That is the way most people, a large percentage of the population, that's what they believe consciousness is. And, it's very hard to argue with it. Well, it's this 50-50 thing, dualist, physicalist, people tend to fall into one or the camp or the other. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You're unusual if you change your point of view. Most people are pretty fall into one camp and kind of hold on to it, mainly because of their upbringing. Your upbringing often defines where you fall on this. All right. So we're going to look at a few papers now that are on here about consciousness, just expanding on these ideas a little bit. You will see on Brightspace there is a section called "What is Consciousness?" and there's some papers there. We're not going to, have a look at them. I'm just going to jump and skip through a few of them, read a few paragraphs on some of them, hopefully just expanding this, some of these ideas. So we'll start with a paper from our old friend, David Chalmers, the consciousness man, the Australian, who runs this consciousness center down in New York. And as he says, consciousness, this is one of his seminal papers on consciousness, one of the first papers he wrote. Consciousness poses the most baffling problems in the science of the mind. There is nothing we know more intimately than conscious experience, but there's nothing that's harder to explain. You all know you're conscious, but you all had trouble writing a definition of it. It is really difficult to talk about and explain it. Lots of scientific investigation has found out about mental processes, but we still don't know about consciousness. Many have tried to explain it, but the explanations always fall short. That's why we can't settle on dualist or physicalist, because both sides have problems. So Chalmers split the problem into two. And this has again become quite a standard way of thinking about consciousness. He says there's not just one problem of consciousness because it's such an ambiguous term. He says divide consciousness into hard and easy problems. The easy problems of consciousness, or the easy side of consciousness, the ones we can explain, can be explained by cognitive science or neural mechanisms. Hard problems are the ones that we can't explain. So he says, easy things. We can categorize, we can recognize things, react to things in an environment, and we can see how our brain does that. We can integrate information. I'm talking to you now, and that information is going into your mind, and we can work out how that happens. And so there's all these things where we focus our attention, how we control our movements and behavior, being awake and asleep. Those are all easy, he says. We can literally look at the mind and work out what's going on. But then he says we get that subjective Nagel stuff. What is it like to be a bat? The subjective experience, feeling pain, seeing the color red. What happens when we do that? And he says we have no way of explaining that. So this easy and difficult thing has become a standard way of explaining consciousness. There's a nice example here in an article from Psychology Today. This chap splits consciousness into three types of consciousness. Consciousness is notoriously difficult to define. There are at least three basic meanings. The first is functional awareness and response. The second is subjective experience. And the third is explicit self-conscious awareness, which only humans have. So here we go. He says, here's an example. Consider the other day I was walking my dog Benji and we came across a groundhog. Benji flipped out and started pulling me down the hill towards a frightened creature. There was absolutely no doubt that the dog, Benji, was conscious of the groundhog. And this is this first level of being functionally aware and responding to it. Something was in the environment. I became conscious of it and I responded to it. The dog responded. The groundhog ran away into a burrow. So the groundhog was conscious of the dog. This is functional awareness. So it's a level of consciousness, but is it like human consciousness? Probably not. But humans have that level of consciousness as well, this simple ability to respond to things. So defining consciousness in terms of functional awareness and responsivity is broad and general. Many animals and things exhibit functional awareness. We can have robots with functional awareness that will recognize things and respond to them. Cells have functional awareness, amoebas. Plants have functional awareness. They respond to light and dark, hot and cold. So the machines, as he says here, can have functional awareness. So, however, it's important to note that if you're unconscious in a coma, you don't have functional awareness and responsivity. So that is a lack of even the basic level of consciousness. This meaning helps us see why people think of plants, cells, robots as conscious. And if you believe that everything has consciousness, that's this term, panpsychism. So that's the first level of consciousness, the most simple, the easy consciousness, if you like. The second is Nagel's idea of consciousness, the subjective conscious experience, the qualitative experience felt from a first-person perspective. They always give the same examples: seeing red, tasting a strawberry, feeling pain. All the things that happen to humans. Dogs can experience pain. Dogs can eat strawberries. Do they have a qualitative experience? What is it like to be a dog eating a strawberry? So is there a qualitative experience there, which gives it this second level of consciousness? So we can say that maybe animals have this level of consciousness, but it's hard to say that a robot will have this level of consciousness, or an AI. How will it have this qualitative experience? So this is a different referent from functional awareness. If I'd taken a video of Benji, everyone could see that he was conscious of the groundhog, but only Benji, the dog, knows what the world looks like, smells like, feels like from Benji's position in the world. There is an experience that is like something to be Benji the dog. You've got to talk about it in kind of Nagel terms. This is from the inside. So this is David Chalmers' Easy and Hard Problems of Consciousness. So he talks about, he studies this, but he says there's something that only humans have: self-conscious awareness. And this is being aware of ourselves in the world and reflecting on those experiences. So Gordon Gallup developed the mirror self-recognition task, which only a small number of animals, humans, chimpanzees, dolphins, and elephants can do. Gorillas fail it. Does anyone know what the mirror self-recognition task is? Yeah. Yeah. That's only the first part of it. So you look in the mirror and can recognize yourself. And most animals can do this, you know, many animals can. But no. What we do is we then put a mark on them that they can't see, like a spot on their forehead. Now, if they recognize that there is something on their forehead that they have changed, then that is self-recognition. So it's putting a mark on someone like that they can't see, but they see it in a mirror, and do they recognize that something has changed? Because they recognize themselves and recognize the change. Only a few animals can do this. And what this means is that humans can do this thing where when you go to a therapist and the therapist says, "Tell me how that made you feel." This is the self-conscious awareness. You are not only having a subjective experience, you are self-aware of that experience explicitly and can explain it and talk about it. Direct evidence of explicit self-conscious awareness. Only humans demonstrate this kind of explicit self-consciousness.
What if humans can't determine because they can't communicate with the animals?
Yeah, what happens if you can't communicate well enough to tell people how you feel? Yeah, there are well, let's say there are some humans who are better at it than others. I think that's fair to say. But can you see the concept, though, that humans are able to talk about their feelings or their pain or describe what it's like to eat a strawberry? Yeah. That is something that other animals can't do. So it's a way of breaking it down in a different way. All right. So I'll just show you one more quick thing and then we'll leave it for today. So this particular article, will we ever understand consciousness? Scientists and philosophers debate consciousness. So plenty of great minds have pondered the meaning of consciousness. René Descartes introduced the notion of mind-body dualism, this idea of the soul. The body is fundamentally separate from the world of the mind or soul. English biologist Thomas Huxley developed this theory that physical events in the brain give rise to mental phenomena. So, McGinn, this philosopher, believes that no matter how much scientists study the brain, the mind is fundamentally incapable of comprehending itself. And this is quite a popular view, that the human mind cannot understand the human mind. We're like Neanderthals trying to understand astronomy or Shakespeare. There's a cognitive gap. Now, the reason we're reading this is this guy, Christoph Koch, is one of the world's leading neuroscientists, very much a materialist and physicalist. And he takes issue with the view. He says, this is a defeatist argument. His rebuttal is colourful. He tends to wear bright Hawaiian shirts. He says, philosophers have a disastrous record at explaining things. So philosophers have been trying to explain consciousness for 3,000 years and I haven't got anywhere close to it. He said, we neuroscientists are going to sort it out for you. So what happened was, in 1998, David Chalmers and Nicholas Koch, this neuroscientist, made a bet. They bet a case of very expensive wine that in 25 years, David Koch believed, the guy in the orange there, He believed that in 25 years, we will solve the problem of consciousness and understand human consciousness. This was in 2023. He said, by 2023, we'll understand. They had this bet. And there was a big event in New York City in 2023 where David Chalmers had to give him where he had to give David Chalmers a case of very expensive wine because they haven't explained consciousness yet. But he believed they would do it by 2023. So 25-year wager from 1998, Christoph Koch and David Chalmers. But what was interesting about this event is both of them said, we are a lot closer than we were 25 years ago. Yeah, neuroscience has gone a long way, but we're not fully there yet. So they made another bet for another 25 years. So we'll see in 2046. All right. Any final questions or comments? No. Okay, this is what I think we're going to do. This worksheet is due on not this Sunday, not the Sunday coming, the Sunday after, okay? So we will have another lecture on Thursday where I finish talking about consciousness, maybe start talking about something else. And then on Tuesday afterwards, we'll have a discussion with all the readings I want you to do. The readings you can see on worksheet 4. You can download worksheet 4. I put it all online. There are 3 sets of readings. I'll show you them. To do. Again, I expect you to be teaching each other about these things in your online meetings or in the... So you study one of them, fill in one question. Some of you are going to read about Daniel Dennett. There's some videos and notes here. Some of you are going to read about David Chalmers, and some of you are going to read about the science of consciousness. Yeah, there's a bunch of articles there and a couple of videos. Undergraduates, there's probably enough information here for you. Grad students, I probably want you to dig a little bit more, okay? Any questions on what you're doing? So remember, Tuesday next week, you kind of have to turn up for that one, you know, if you... Yeah, because that will be an assessed one. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. See you on Thursday. Yeah, you too.